From a bench outside the castle in Owings Mills, Maryland, it is a little chilly. It's also the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Saturday night because we have nothing better to do. It's also day 3 of the NFL draft. It is over and done with. The Ravens have made all 11 selections in the 2025 NFL draft. We have talked about the first 3. We talked about Malachi Starks a couple podcasts ago. Go back and listen to that if you so choose. We talked about their day 2 picks yesterday in Mike Green and Emory Jones Jr. And today we are going to talk about the 8 day 3 draft picks that the Ravens made. Yes, all 8. We are live on YouTube as well as X. Please give us a thumbs up, write us a 5-star review, and I'll read it out here on the show. Jonas, unfortunately, yesterday's episode, we had some technical difficulties when I was going back through, and some of your audio got cut off, so I had to use just a graphic over top of our faces, which means people didn't get to see our beautiful faces here on the Banner Ravens podcast, but they can watch today and they can see how tightly we are sitting on this bench. We are no elbow room whatsoever between the two of us. Somebody commented live yesterday and said that it's not jail. You guys can spread out, but we like to be close to each other. So that's what we're doing here.
Yep, I'm fat. It's cool.
That's not at all what I'm saying. It's just a small bench.
I
not
get the
meant for 2
implication.
people.
Fat shaming is a cool Paul.
Oh my God. All right. Well, our word of the day today.
Speaking of big boys.
Our word of the day today is successor. The definition, one that follows language of origin. It's the Anglo-French, I don't know. 13th century is the first known usage. And Jonas, Loop, as in Tyler Loop, could be the successor to Justin Tucker as the next Ravens kicker. He was taken today with a 6th round pick. He becomes the first kicker ever to be drafted by the Baltimore Ravens. We figured the Ravens would draft a kicker today. They have done so, and this could be an historic moment for the Ravens.
Yeah, second kicker off the board, so I guess we'll never know whether Tyler Loop was indeed their preferred option. Andre Sporgalis went to the New England Patriots, I believe, 4 or 5 picks earlier.
4 picks, yeah.
4 picks earlier. I did talk today to Jamie Cole of Cole's Kicking, the preeminent kicking guru in the game, who worked with Tyler during the pre-draft process, has been working with him for a couple of years, so has gotten to know him pretty well. Spoke highly of him. Obviously, he's a guy who's kicked some 70-yarders in live situations during those camps there. He said that when he talked to Randy Brown during this pre-draft process, I think he talked to him about 3 times in the past couple of weeks, maybe past couple of months, and every time that he talked to him, he was in a different time zone. So Randy Brown was racking up those frequent flyers. He was scouring the earth, scouring the globe for the Ravens' next potential kicker. It sounds like Tyler Loop was the preferred target. Obviously, a guy who will not wow you with his accuracy if you're just box score scouting. But if you look at those past 2 years, most of those misses have been from 50+ yards. Obviously, what's going to separate the good kickers from the great kickers is your ability to be accurate from long range. Certainly in a division that's inhospitable to inconsistent kickers like the AFC North. It's tough to kick in Baltimore. It's tough to kick in Pittsburgh. You have to be able to kick in all climates and all conditions. And that's going to be the situation for the Ravens. Justin Tucker hasn't been particularly accurate, even when he was out of the headlines. The Ravens have to hope that Tyler Loop, if he is indeed the next guy, can be a man of all seasons, because they can't afford to have a situation where they're dealing with a kicker, missing 1 of every 5 kicks. We saw just how costly that was during the regular season last year.
Yeah, and Giannahan also talked to former Ravens special teams coach Gary Zauner, who said that he thought that this was the best kicker in the draft in Tyler Loop. And obviously, Eric Costa said after all the picks were made today, he said, once it's not like the Ravens saw that pick that the Patriots made 4 picks earlier and said, well, now we have to. But you see the first kicker go off the board. You want to get a kicker. You have 11 picks. Might as well pull the trigger. And look, Justin Tucker's been the kicker for this team since their Super Bowl season in 2012. And he is still on the roster as of right now. He is still under investigation by the NFL. We don't yet know when that is going to be completed, let alone the outcome of that investigation. As the Baltimore Banner has reported that 16 women at 8 different spas and wellness centers in the Baltimore area have accused him of inappropriate sexual behavior, and he's denied those allegations. But at this point, both those kickers are on the roster. So we thought perhaps once our initial reporting came out, once we found out the NFL was doing an investigation, we thought there was a chance that the Ravens would be without a kicker on the roster as they entered the draft. However, both those kickers are here. And it's interesting, John Harbaugh said today that Justin Tucker was in the facility a couple days ago, earlier this week, and that he was kicking as well, and that they've had conversations. So as we stand right now, we are months away from the start of the season. We don't yet know how this is going to play out. But the fact that the Ravens were willing to commit a draft pick to a kicker, something that they've never done before, tells you how seriously they are taking this position and, the possibility of Justin Tucker being removed from the roster at some point.
Because if you have 2 kickers on your season opening 53-man roster, then you have 0 kickers. It's the old adage about starting quarterbacks, and it's applied to kickers. I don't think I can remember a situation where a team opened a season with 2 kickers on the roster. That's why you have all these teams that have gone through the wars of having terrible kickers have to make a decision by the end of August, by the start of September, because it is an important position, but not so important that you can waste a valuable roster. And maybe it's a situation where, if the NFL finds damning results in this investigation and they are suspending Justin Tucker and the Ravens are unwilling to cut him, then he could potentially be, on a list where the Ravens don't have to pay him and he's not taking up a roster spot. So technically there is this limbo where Justin Tucker is still with the Ravens, but not with them Ravens, and Tyler Loop is kicker 1 for this team to open the season. It seems more likely than not that Tyler Loop or someone else is the man going forward. Obviously, the Colts released what was it Nick Folk? The Colts parted ways with their kicker.
I'll be honest, I don't have my finger on the pulse of
kicking news. So there are free agent kickers with some track record out there. Obviously, the Ravens having the infrastructure that they do, with John Harbaugh having a special teams background, with Randy Brown being one of the few full-time kicking instructors in the NFL. That was one thing that Jamie Cole mentioned, that, if you are going to be a rookie kicker coming into any situation in the NFL, it helps to come into a situation like Baltimore where you have that special teams structure in place. But you look at the hit rate for kickers drafted in general, like I think it's about 50-50, whether these guys actually hang with the team that drafts them. It speaks to how difficult it is to make it in this league for anyone, much less a kicker.
Yeah, by the way, we are live on YouTube and X, and because of our technical difficulties, I just want to ask, if you do hear Jonas's or my mic going in and out at any point, please comment and let us know, and we can hopefully rectify that. Tyler Loop was one of just 8 players drafted by the Ravens.
7 too many.
7 too many. Let's talk about the others that were taken by the Ravens on day 3 of the draft. Let's start with their 4th round pick at 129. That's Cal linebacker Teddy Buchanan, 6'2", 233 pounds. Great size, great athleticism, special teams upside, and I think that's the key for this selection. It's something that was mentioned by Eric Costa after the fact. This is a team that needs help on special teams, that has lost a couple depth linebackers. I think that Teddy Buchanan can work his way into the mix early by contributing on special teams like all of these day 3 guys can.
Yeah, that athleticism should play with the Ravens special teams. Lord knows that with the guys that they lost in free agency, Blake Harrison, Chris Ward, they need the help out there. Obviously, it's going to be tough for any linebacker that the Ravens take, whether it's a first rounder or a 7th rounder, to be able to fit in year 1 as a actual defensive contributor. It's just the learning curve, as we've seen time and time again for these linebackers. These off-ball linebackers is so steep as to make any realistic expectation of them contributing in year 1 just kind of unrealistic. But, he seemed like a very smart guy. He's obviously well-built, was able to contribute as a pass rusher to that Cal defense, which was something he had not been able to do at a lower level with Cal Davis. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see. I'm sure he's going to, he's a guy who will, pass the get off the bus test. Just looks like a guy that, will be able to contribute athletically right away without a whole lot build up without a whole lot of foundational help from Ravens strength conditioning staff. So it's gonna be interesting to see. I think he'll probably flash during training camp, but it's a whole other ball game going from the ACC to the NFL.
Yeah, linebacker is also not a position that you can really gauge in training camp because you often don't see.
It's impossible.
Yeah, you don't see 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense too often. So so much of it comes down to instincts. So much of it comes down to stuff that is not hitting, that is not running, which is, the most athletic guys are obviously going to flash during training camp. Jonas, I forgot our little way to spice this up, this day 3 conversation, which is you wanted to put all of the guys that we talked about today into one of 4 categories: star, starter, bench, and bleh. Of those 4 categories, where's Teddy Buchanan rank for you? Star, starter? It's also tough to call a day 3 pick a star, but I want you to put your star on one guy. Is Teddy Buchanan going to be a star?
Maybe a star special teamer, which will get you a lot of love in Baltimore. I think most likely outcome for him over these next 2 years is probably bench. The Ravens have Roquan Smith. They have Trenton Simpson. 2 more years of Trenton Simpson. There's still hopes that he can develop into something special. So I think based on where he is, based on again, the 1 year of high level experience at Cal, I think the more likely outcome for a guy like Teddy Buchanan is probably the bench.
Yeah, I would say special team starter perhaps.
Yeah,
but we have to say. All right, round 5, 141, Alabama A&M offensive tackle Carson Vincent, 6'7", 314 pounds. He's a big dude. He's been a left tackle pretty much his entire collegiate career. However, he's kind of considered a project. I mean, you're coming from a small school like Alabama A&M, and Eric DeCosta was talking about his strength, said that when he met him, they shook hands, and Carson Vincent almost broke his hand because of just how strong he is. He's got size. He's got strength, but he may need to be able to use that strength better, according to scouts, in order to work his way into an eventual NFL rotation.
This is probably the biggest leap in competition for anyone in this draft class. I think it says a lot about where he's coming from and just how impressive he was that he was the only historically Black college or university player invited to the Senior Bowl. He got some good looks there. Obviously, I think that's been an environment, it seems, where Eric DeCosta really puts a lot of stock into. He went to the Senior Bowl last year. Really liked what he saw from Roger Rosengart, where the Ravens were willing to take a second-round pick on him. Eric DeCosta talked yesterday about how impressed they were with the competitiveness of Henry Jones at the Senior Bowl. And here's a guy, Carson Vincent, who I think went to the Senior Bowl, had some impressive reps. There's a one-on-one where he stonewalls first-round pick Shamar Stewart, now headed to the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, a lot of guys got wins against Shamar Stewart, but I think it's impressive that a guy who had really only played at that small school level was able to do it against Shamar Stewart. So, I think he has starter traits. I think he's like a upper 20th percentile athlete, but obviously he's going to require some coaching up because it wouldn't require a lot of imagination to foresee a guy like this washing out just based on everything that you need to go your way to develop into a potential starter level play at this level.
Yeah, I feel like this is the kind of guy that the Ravens would love to be able to stash in the practice squad.
Yeah.
But as a 5th round pick, you never know if that guy, if you have to cut him from the roster, is going to make it through waivers and ultimately come back to you. But if he could get a year of just learning, training, being in the building on the practice squad, however he's here, I think that would be hugely beneficial because offensive line is and tackle, especially for this team, they really only have 2 good tackles, Ronnie Stanley and Roger Rosengarten, but they've already lost their depth behind those guys. And so having somebody to, work into a backup role long-term is going to be helpful.
Yeah. And we don't know exactly what the plan is for Emory Jones. He could be the swing tackle. He could be a guard. They're going to try him at both spots, see which he feels better at, which one they like him more at. But Carson Vincent, a guy who's easy to root for, just lit up the Zoom room when we were talking to him, was very, very proud of his HBCU lineage, said, folks who go to HBCUs need to give back more to them so that you can have these kind of gems unearthed from the process. So very well spoken, very, very, very cool guy to talk to. Very good head on his shoulders, and easy to root for, like I said.
Of the 4 categories, I'm going to have to say bench for now. Would you agree, Jonas?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about just he has starter tools,
Right.
but it's very rare that you see someone coming from that level make it at this NFL level as a starter.
Exactly. All right. Another round 5 pick at 176. Western Michigan cornerback Bilal Kone, 6'1", 190. Obviously tall. He's obviously got the size. According to scouts, he's got first-rate ball skills. That was something Eric DeCosta reiterated as well. Eric DeCosta also said he could probably stand to get a little bit stronger, so getting him in the weight room would be big. And having a guy who has good ball skills, we saw last year that Brandon Stevens struggled mightily with the ball in the air, with the ball thrown his way. It's not bad to have somebody who maybe not a ball hawk, but maybe has the ability to get his head around quicker and break up some passes.
Yeah, he's got that prototypical size. He's been well-traveled, started his career at JUCO, moved to Indiana State, then moved on to Western Michigan. Obviously has a pretty interesting backstory. His younger brother died when he was sent to enter high school. Kone himself moved in with a family of Trey Jones and Tyus Jones, both now professional basketball players in the NBA. So he's bounced around a lot, but he's got good traits, got good ball production. Obviously, is coming into a cornerback room that I think has pretty good depth because you have those 3 potential starters and Humphrey, Wiggins, and Awuzie. And you've got the good depth of Armour Davis and TJ Tampa. So I don't think we're expecting a whole lot from him year one. But he has a relationship with Malachi Starks. They've been training together the past couple of months. So it'll be interesting to see if he pops as a rookie.
I would say of the 4 categories, bench as well for Bilal Kone. Would you agree, Jonas?
Yep.
All right. Next up, we've already talked a lot about him, so we don't need to spend too much more time on Arizona kicker Tyler Loop, taken with the 186th pick. At this point of the 4 categories, I would say starter, but we have yet to know anything about the future of the Ravens situation. We've talked a good amount about him. I liked the fact also that he has a tiny bit of punter experience back in 2020. It's a long time ago, but obviously the Ravens are okay with guys who can do both on special teams. Jordan Stout has the ability to do both. We saw him in some kickoffs last year. So in a pinch, you like having a kicker who can also punt on occasion.
Yeah, and it's, I guess, the thing we have the least clue about is just how he's going to transition to the NFL kickoff game. It's a little bit of an art there.
Are they going to change the rules again as well?
I forget. I think they tabled the discussion on moving it back another 5 yards. I think that's something that John Harbaugh is in favor of, just incentivizing kickoffs, because you can just blast the ball out of the end zone and the team starts at the 25-30 yard line. So that's something that he's going to have to get better at, or just get some reps at point blank period. Whether he can be a guy who can drop that ball at the 2 yard line, because if you can, then that's probably going to work out for you in the long run.
Yep. All right. Next up, another 6th rounder at 203. Ravens took Colorado wide receiver LeJohntay Wester, smaller guy, 5'9", 170 pounds. Started his career at FAU, transferred to Colorado, finished the year last year with 74 catches for 931 yards, 10 touchdowns. The thing to like about LeJohntay Wester is that he was a kick returner, was a punt returner at Colorado. That is a position that the Ravens wanted to upgrade coming into this offseason, and they haven't done anything at the NFL veteran level so far, but they go out and get a guy that has that potential coming into training camp to take over as your main returner.
And we saw just how often or how many guys the Ravens went through at punt returner last year when the signing of what's his face, the former Bills guy.
Sims?
No.
Deontay Hardy.
Deontay Hardy didn't work out. The Ravens had to move on to Tyler Moss. He had some drops that he had to deal with, and that knocked him out. And then they brought in Steven Sims, and he had a drop, I think. So they are just looking for a sure pair of hands back there. It would be great if he could do double duty as a kick returner, but obviously where he has done his most hay is as a punt returner. 1 punt return touchdown last year, another punt return touchdown the year before at FAU. So he's got that juice. He's got that maneuverability. But the Ravens, I think, have a bunch of different options there. It's going to be kind of a cook-off to see just who wins that job in training camp.
Yeah, I mean, and as in terms of his production as a wide receiver, it's tough to judge him when he had a 5th round quarterback thrown to him. It's difficult there. Shedeur Sanders, of course, the joke there. I would say starter on special teams. Jonas.
Yep, I agree.
I think that he probably, as we stand right now, has the inside track at that return job, but a lot can happen over the coming months. Another 6th round pick. We're just rolling with these 6th rounders, Jonas. At 210, the Ravens took Virginia Tech defensive tackle Aeneas Peebles. Aeneas, as in the Aeneid that we learned was earlier today was written by Virgil.
Son of Aphrodite.
Yes, not Virgil. Aeneas.
No, Aeneas.
Yes. And Homer wrote the Iliad, right? Homer wrote the Odyssey.
Yeah, and Virgil wrote the Aeneid, right?
Who wrote the Iliad?
Sorry, yeah, Virgil wrote the Aeneid.
Great question. We'll ask all our fans of Greco-Roman literature out there to determine for us who wrote what. 6 foot and 290 pounds for Aeneas Peebles. First 4 years at Duke. In his career, 11 and a half sacks in 5 seasons, 3 in 2024, and obviously finished as a Hokie. This was one of, according to Eric Acosta, this was one of John Harbaugh's guys. One guy that stood out to him on tape. He liked his explosion. I watched a little bit of him. It looked like he was beaten up on some ACC tackles, ACC guards on the inside, and looked like a guy who has the potential to maybe fill in, maybe not in the Michael Pierce role because he's not as much of a run stuffer, but could push the pocket a little bit.
You forgot the most important detail, which is his nickname, which is Fub. Comes from when he was a fat and chubby baby.
I was too. So I think you're going to have to call me Fub.
You still got the cheeks, Paul.
Thanks. I think.
It's a pretty, he seems like a pretty divisive prospect. I think Bleacher Report had him as like a 6th to 7th round, close to undrafted guy. Some sites had him as a potential day 3 guy. Obviously, he has that pass rush juice. He was up near the top of the list and pressure rate and quick pressure rate. But I guess the fear is that if he cannot port that skill set over, then he's not a guy who at his current build is going to give you a lot as a run stuffer. And I think that's probably, if we're going to take a step back and do the 20,000 foot view for this Ravens draft class, it is probably their failure to bring in a guy who could adequately replace Michael Pierce. I mean, Eric DeCosta talked about how the Ravens could have some options there in the undrafted free agency class. Obviously, it's not super expensive to bring in some of these kind of over-the-hill nose tackles who can maybe give you 10 to 15 snaps. But we saw that Travis Jones last year was dealing with some ankle, with that ankle injury, which clearly limited him over the second half of the season. We know Broderick Washington can step in as that 0 tech, even though he's probably better off as the 3 tech. So I think, that's probably the biggest shortcoming of this draft class, just not being able to take advantage of what draft analysts said was a class just teeming with really impressive run stuffers. Maybe the Ravens didn't think as highly of it. We heard Eric DeCosta tell us that there were some nose tackles that they liked. I think the Miami Dolphins clearly just loaded up on some of these nose tackles, not just Kenneth Grant, but later in the process as well. So you could probably, stroke your chin and wonder why they weren't as aggressive in getting some of these guys when, you look at where the Ravens took some of these picks in round 4, round 5, didn't really match up with where the consensus big board had them. And you can say like, they probably should have been a little bit more aggressive in getting some of these big boys into the building. But, like I said, it's not a premium position. And if you need one, there'll probably be some guys coming off in free agency just because teams are going to shed these guys, having already brought in a younger rookie class.
Homer wrote both the Iliad and the Odyssey, 2 epic poems that are considered masterpieces of all time. Yeah, I think that this is, like you said, it's not the end of the world at this point. However, if we are sitting here in week 3 and saying the Ravens can't stop the run, we can point back to this day as a missed opportunity. All right, one more 6th rounder. I can't believe we have more 6th rounders before we have our 7th rounder. At 212, the Ravens took Rutgers cornerback Robert Longerbeam. Despite the fact that his last name is Longerbeam, he's not a longer prospect. He's just 5'11", 174 pounds, 53 career games, 31 at cornerback, and played his entire career at Rutgers. But Eric DeCosta said, watching him on tape, he plays bigger than his size. What did you think of Robert Longerbeam?
I cannot say I'm very familiar with his game.
Unacceptable. You don't have all 250 draft prospects memorized?
It is.
After this, we're going to break down every undrafted free agent that the Ravens are going to sign.
That's behind the Patreon. You have to pay for that. It is interesting how old some of these guys are. The Ravens usually on those day 1 or day 2 picks are sticking to guys who are pretty early in their athletic infancy, 20 years old, 21 years old, 22 years old. Robert Longerbeam already over 24 years old, will turn 25. Perhaps if the Ravens are still alive in the playoffs on January 18th next year. So he's been around the block a couple times. The Ravens, I think at that point, kind of know what they're getting in the athletic development of some of these guys. Not a whole lot of room for improvement, at least in terms of testing, because of just how long they've been in a Big Ten strength conditioning program. So obviously, if he's 175 at age 24, he's probably not going to put on a whole lot more muscle. And you do worry about just the long-term viability of someone like that, not just being able to hold up and run defense, but also just you need a little bit more body armor to kind of withstand the slings and arrows that you're going to get in a typical NFL training camp. So
of outrageous fortune.
Shout out Shakespeare.
Say slings and arrows and not say of outrageous fortune.
I didn't even know that was the next part of that line.
Unbelievable.
But he runs well. Obviously, sub 440. Has a decent ball production. 10 passes defended in 2021, 8 and 22, 11 and 23, 13 and 24. So he knows how to get his hand on the ball. But voted a 2014 captain, the son of a football coach. So you know that he loves ball. You know that he has those good character traits. But obviously, you just hope that with that speed that you're able to contribute on special teams right away, and then hopefully develop into a guy who could work his way into the rotation.
We're trying so hard today to be the thinking man's podcast, mentioning Shakespeare, mentioning Virgil, mentioning Homer. I didn't get your starter, star, bench, blah for Aeneas Peebles.
Well, I think it's going to be it's tough for a guy who's probably going to be limited to pass rushing snaps to be a star. But if he can be just like a sub package pass rushing star, I think that's on the table, which is more than you can say for pretty much any 6th round pick taken over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and in terms of Robert Longerbeam, starter, bench, blah.
Probably. I think from here on out, everyone is going to be blah.
Well, there's only one other guy we have to talk about, and that's LSU guard Garrett Dellinger, who's taken with the 243rd pick. Big dude, 6'4", 325 pounds, Senior Bowl participant, born in Maryland as well. So we
don't know where though.
We're still
tracking down that data.
We're still trying to figure that out. Played 7 games at left guard in 2024, but missed half of the season after having tightrope surgery on a high ankle sprain. Jonas, give me your take on Garrett Dellinger.
I think that the watchword with him is injuries. Just he was good enough to start as a true freshman at LSU. That's no small thing. But if it wasn't one thing, it was another. 2021, missed the bowl game with a shoulder injury. 2022, missed a game with a right hand injury. Missed 4 games with a right knee injury. Clean bill of health in 2023. But then limited to 7 games last year because he missed 6 games with a right ankle injury. So those are, ball and socket joints. It's a little bit worrisome with the shoulder, with the knee, with the ankle. You worry about the long-term viability of a guy who's already that beaten up. He did put good tape on film. I think PFF had him as like a 70+ grade each of the past 2 years. Obviously, he's a former top 100 recruit nationally, so he has that pedigree. That's something that I think the Ravens do take into consideration when they're making these day 3 picks. So I think he could be like a good player for the Ravens if he stays healthy. I think obviously that was if you want to be optimistic, you look at someone like Patrick McCary, who came into Baltimore with the worries about how is he going to hold up with that back injury of his. He turned into a guy that the Ravens could rely on to not just be a spot starter here and there, but last year, played basically every game for the Ravens and almost every snap. So I think, betting on a guy like this is a good and wise bet. But if he flames out after a year because he just can't stay out of the training room, then, we'll know why.
Do you have a favorite of the Ravens 8 day 3 picks?
I think Peebles, just because of that pass rush juice.
Me too.
But I am kind of curious to see what Vincent and Buchanan can develop into. Just, it seems like Vincent is a big ball of clay that the Ravens can, if it works out, then you've got yourself a a very nice, very cheap potential starting tackle or swing tackle. Obviously, we don't know exactly what the plans are for Emory Jones. So, if Emory Jones is a guy that they do see inside, then Vincent's development, I think, becomes all the more important. And then Buchanan, again, great athleticism, great production last year. Very smart guy, was a very accomplished artist, we should say. Has a dedicated Instagram account for his drawings. He did some Breaking Bad drawings.
Really?
Yeah, Bryan Cranston, Heisenberg.
Yeah.
So
the one who knocks.
Teddy Buchanan, will he be the one who knocks and the Ravens defense? But he's well built and extremely productive last year. Led that Cal team in tackles. I think led him also in TFLs. So maybe he's a guy who surpasses all expectations. Obviously, he's going to have a former linebacker himself and Zach Orr kind of steering that ship for him. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do.
All right. In terms of the entire draft class as a whole, the Ravens did make 11 picks, which I'll be honest, I didn't see them making all 11. They did make all 11. The positional breakdown, at least what I could tell, I could get this wrong because at the end of 3 days of the NFL draft, your vision starts to get pretty blurry. 3 offensive linemen, 2 cornerbacks, 1 defensive tackle, 1 edge rusher, 1 safety, 1 wide receiver, 1 kicker, 1 inside linebacker. Jonas, were you surprised at all by the positional breakdowns? It feels like you have 11 picks. You expect to check just about every box, but to me, looking at this, considering that the wide receiver is more a returner, considering you got your kicker, you got a safety who you invested a high pick in. I mean, they position-wise checked all the boxes that I was looking for them to check coming into today, and I feel like they allocated the resources pretty well.
Yeah, I think that if you're picking nits, it's just that you would have liked to see that 3 offensive linemen down to a 2 and that 1 defensive lineman up to a 2. Just have a little bit more balance there. The Ravens entered this draft with basically 3 viable defensive linemen in Brody, Nnamdi Madubuike, and Chavis Jones. You would have liked to see a little bit more investment in that position, but to get Peebles in round 6, I think is good value. And again, if we're talking about just front 7 juice in general, they got Mike Green on round 2. So I think they are more than capably set up to be another very good front 7 unit next year. And we know about the draft and development ability of this coaching staff. Sure, you would prefer to have a 4th rounder as a nose tackle than someone just kind of coming off the street, but maybe they'll be able to find the next Michael Pierce.
Right. Real quick, how many of these 11 picks make the team in September? If I had to just guess, we're so far away. We have no idea what's going to happen. Obviously, guys could get injured. Anything can happen. I would say 9 maybe make the team. Maybe the final 2 selections in round 6 and round 7 don't make the team.
After this is over, I'll tweet out my kind of updated depth chart, which is color coded with all the projected starters and borderline starters and backups.
You've been doing a phenomenal job on it. At Jonas_Shaffer is his handle.
But I think based on the injury history of some of these guys, based on the depth that the Ravens already have, I think probably 9 is a good bet. I think some guys just will not make the team. Not all the late round picks in recent Ravens draft classes have made the team, which is it's not a shame. Like if you take as many 6th round picks as the Ravens have,
right?
Even though the Ravens said that they had 217 draftable players, that does not mean that all these guys are worthy of a roster spot by the end of the day.
Yeah, and obviously, last year we came into the summer workout portion, thinking that a lot more guys would make the team, and a lot of guys ended up being hurt. I mean, somebody that they thought would contribute a lot, Adise Isaac, missed a lot of time. TJ Tampa, wasn't as big a contributor in his first year as we thought. The Ravens are a deep team. They're a good team with plenty of guys already set at their starter spots. So I can't really see too many of these guys having an immediate impact. Except for, Malachi Starks. I expect him to work his way in there early. I expect Mike Green to get a lot of pass rushing snaps on this team as well. And so long as you have 2 top contributors in their rookie seasons, that's a good start.
Yeah, I think we'll probably have a broader discussion about this.
We got time
next week when we maybe have a guest on to talk about the draft class. But I think the interesting and not at all premature question to ask is this the best Ravens roster of the Lamar Jackson era?
It's always a question. It's a good one.
You've got Pro Bowlers along the offensive line, Pro Bowlers at tackle, Pro Bowlers at tight end. You got a Pro Bowler wide receiver, Pro Bowler wide receiver at running back, fullback. Lamar Jackson is one of the 3 best players in the NFL. On defense, you've addressed probably the biggest question with the Mike Green selection, assuming that he is good to go for this 2025 season. You feel better about the linebackers with Trenton Simpson having another year under his belt. You've got Nate Wiggins a year older. You've got Marlon Humphrey a year older. They obviously feel okay about the depth there developing with Jalen Armour-Davis and TJ Tampa. And then you've got, a potential plug-and-play starter with Malachi Starks slotting in there next to Ardarius Washington and Kyle Hamilton. So it's a roster with really not a whole lot of holes.
In terms of recent history, I think I feel a lot better about this roster right now than I did a year ago about the 2024 roster. But going back 2 years, I felt very good about that 2023 roster. That roster ended up being outstanding, and that roster ended up taking them to the AFC Championship game, getting them the 1 seed, and so on. But that's a good question. Question that we'll ponder when we have more sleep in our body at some point. At Jonas_Shaffer is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Of course, the BaltimoreBanner.com is your place to get all Ravens news. Jonas has you covered. Gianna Hahn has you covered. And we have much more coverage coming as we get deeper into the offseason and closer towards the start of training camp. Thanks so much for tuning in. And for Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano.